Hi, and welcome to Florida's Great Northwest. This is our first TV show, and I want to introduce right away my guest, Bentina Terry. Welcome, Bentina. It's good to have you here. Bentina is the Vice President of External Affairs and Corporate Services for Gulf Power, and we're going to talk a little bit about what actually Bentina does. And you know, the reason that I wanted Bentina on as a first guest is because Florida Great Northwest is a regional organization. Bentina represents a regional organization that's always supported economic development as far as I can remember. And let me tell you a little bit about Florida's Great Northwest, because some of you may wonder, you know, what is Florida's Great Northwest? How does it work among the 16 counties that we coordinate our economic development activities with? And basically, there's three things I'd like to tell you about, and that's one, Florida Great Northwest is a branding organization. We're here to brand the economic benefits and strengths of the Northwest Florida area. That's from Tallahassee to Pensacola. Secondly, we are here to coordinate the marketing activities, the strategic marketing activities for these 16 counties, doing trade shows to recruit businesses from New York, from California, you know, that are interested in locating in a great business climate. And third, we're here to help each of these counties coordinate with their local officials and legislative officials on, you know, what their role should be in working economic development programs. So with that, I'd like to begin by reintroducing Bentina, and who's a good friend and a good supporter of economic development. Bentina, tell us a little bit about, tell your audience about the what you really do as the External Affairs VP and Corporate Services VP.
Thanks. First, Larry, I want to thank you for having me, and thank you for your commitment to Florida's Great Northwest and Northwest Florida. We wouldn't be able to do what we're able to do if it wasn't for people like you dedicating their time and energy, so thank you.
Thank you.
Over at Gulf Power, I'm responsible for our external efforts, and that has to do with our relationships with community officials, press, legislators, our regulators who are over in Tallahassee. It also has to do with our relationships with the media, and public relations, communications, that type of stuff. And then the corporate services piece of the business that I handle has to do with the services offered to the corporation by the corporation. So I have things like facilities and safety and health and security, and just those things that have to happen in order to help our business run. And we do those things so that our linemen, our customer service representatives who deal with the public every day can do that. They can deal with the public. Our people who run our power plants can run our power plants, and they don't have to worry about roofs and floors and computers. So it's a very important role that we do, but we're happy that it's behind the scenes. Well,
you do a great job, and of course, you are the key spokesperson at the Gulf Power Symposiums, and so we always look to you in kicking off that fantastic annual event. So we thank you for that too, and thank you, Gulf Power, for all that you do to help us.
Thank you.
Let's get into some of the questions. You just did a show basically with the EDC Oklahoma County, one of our 16 counties that we support. Tell us a little bit about the 6 Pillars program that I know that you're chairman of the foundation board for the chamber. Right?
Yes, yeah, the Florida Chamber Foundation is the 501c3 nonprofit arm of the Florida Chamber. Okay. And we do public policy work, sponsored research. And one of the most important things that we started doing about 5 or 6 years ago was setting up something called the 6 Pillars. And the 6 Pillars is just a framework for how we can move the state of Florida forward. If you actually, on TV, take an effort and Google the strategic plan for the state of Florida, you'll find that we don't have one. And Larry, for the state of Florida not to have a strategic plan, 19 million people, 4th largest state in this country, well, it's quite a shame. Yeah. And so what the Florida Chamber Foundation decided to do was help fill that gap. How do we create a strategic plan to move Florida forward? By 2030, there will be 5 to 7 million more people living in the state of Florida that live here today. And how do we provide the right environment for those 5 to 7 million people from an economic development standpoint, infrastructure, schools, education, workforce development, quality of life, civic and government systems? I mean, how do we create a place by 2030 that people want to live in Florida? And so the 6 Pillars just creates a framework for communities and the state of Florida to think about how we move Florida forward. And Okaloosa County is just one of the many counties across the state of Florida, one of the many organizations across the state of Florida that's implementing the 6 pillars and becoming a 6-pillar community.
Well, you know, I am a great supporter of Okaloosa County, as you know,
Yeah.
And I think them taking this initiative to take lead on it, and I know it was mentioned to me that perhaps Florida's Great Northwest should, you know, support this as well in a regional effort. And I know that other counties in Florida have done this on a regional basis as well, in Southeast Florida, for example. So maybe it's something that John Hutchinson and I can talk about as well.
Yeah, and that's a good idea. If you want to look at an organization that's done that, myregion.com actually has instituted a regional 6 pillars framework. And the good thing that you get with the 6 pillars is it's not just a framework for considering the issue, it's also issues. It's a framework for looking at the metrics. And we all know in business that if you don't set metrics, you can't really hold people accountable. And what the 6 pillars does is it first establishes those metrics. How are we doing on quality of life and quality places? How are we doing on economic development and innovation? And then you see how those metrics change over time. And what myregion.org has done is they've adopted their own regional scorecard. There's a Florida scorecard, it's at floridascorecard.com, and then now there's MyRegion has its own regional scorecard. And Northwest Florida can consider adopting a regional scorecard as well, so that anybody who has a computer can go online and see how Northwest Florida is doing on the 6 pillars.
Excellent. Well, one of those 6 pillars is economic development, and that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
And you know, I don't know how clearly we can see this 16 counties here, but you go from Escambia County across all the way to Jefferson County and Leon County, Tallahassee, the capital, and you've got 4 major metro areas here with Leon County and Bay County and Okaloosa County and Escambia County, and then you've got a lot of rural counties in this region, as you know. So it's a challenge to really market a region that's so diverse in its economic makeup. But you know, this organization's been around for 13 years now, and thanks again to Gulf Power, because Gulf Power was there from day one supporting this regional idea. And I've talked to so many people in Tallahassee, the legislature, and around the country about regional concepts, just like with the 6 pillars. And that is the way to go. And so, you know, economic development's gotten a lot of attention lately. Why do you think that is, Bentina?
Well, it's because we need it. You know, when I first started, I moved here about 6 years ago, and the state of Florida had been growing by leaps and bounds. And that growth hadn't been because there had been a concerted effort by the state of Florida to recruit businesses here. Right. That growth had been what we'd call more organic. People came here, the numbers of people, it was something like 1,000 people a day were coming to the state of Florida, moving to the state of Florida at one time. And right before the recession, it started to slow down. In fact, it was about after the hurricane season of 2004 that we actually started to see what we'd call halfbacks. In other words, people who moved to Florida from up north, and now they were going halfway back. They were going to North Carolina or Tennessee. And when you start to see that trend, there were a couple of years where Florida actually had negative growth from migration. In other words, we had more people who were moving from the state of Florida than moving into the state of Florida. We were still growing because people were still having babies who lived here, but in terms of imports and exports of people, if you think about it that way, we were exporting more people than we were importing. Yeah. And typically what that means is you were actually exporting talent as well. And so not only was it just retirees who were leaving Florida, it was people's kids who were leaving Florida and not coming back. And so what the state of Florida really had to do was take a step back, and this was part of what the Florida Chamber Foundation did too, and say, we can't live off just our natural beauty anymore. It's a great state. I don't know why anybody else would want to live anywhere else. There's no place as beautiful as Florida is. And being on the East Coast and the Gulf Coast, I mean, it's an ideal location. But the reality is, in order to attract businesses here and to help businesses expand and grow, we have to create a climate that's good for them. And that's really what economic development is all about.
Absolutely. You hit it right on the nail. You know, it's interesting. I'm doing a lot of traveling now for the region and taking a lot of the regional economic developers with me, or I go along with them. And we were recently in New York, New Jersey, and we found from calling on about 14 different national site selection consultants that there is a whole positive attitude about what's happening in Florida today with economic growth and stimulation and incentives. There's a big thing about incentives today, and are they really paying off? Are they really work? And to me, it's like if you don't have these incentives, you're already going to be behind the 8 ball because everybody else has those incentives around the country. So, if everyone else said, okay, we're not going to have incentives, and we all played in that same ballpark, that'd be fine. But that's not the way it is. So it's almost a necessary evil that can create some good jobs and revenues as well.
Well, and I think there's a misunderstanding about incentives. So oftentimes people say to me, well, incentives are only for new businesses. What about the businesses that are here? Well, you know that that's not true.
Right.
There are lots of incentives that are offered to existing businesses for them to be able to expand. There are incentives offered to anybody who wants to start a new business. They don't have to come from somewhere else to start a business. They can start it up right here in Northwest Florida where they already live or work. And so only a portion of our incentives go to businesses that are moving here from somewhere else.
That's correct.
Also, Florida has one of the most rigorous type of return on investment equations that's done on incentives. We're not one of those states that just throws $1 million check at people in order to get them to come here. We actually go through an evaluation over at Enterprise Florida, which is the state's economic development organization, to determine whether or not this is the type of organization, the type of company that we want to move here, and whether or not they're going to return back to our economy the investment we've put in them as a state. And the reality is, while I can't remember the precise numbers, it's less than 10 businesses or organizations that Enterprise Florida has given money to where it didn't work out. And what people also don't realize is with the Enterprise Florida incentives, if the company doesn't come through, if they don't bring the jobs they say they were going to bring, they owe that money back.
That's right.
And we've had companies that have paid the state back. And so the percentage of companies that have taken the money and run, never produced anything and not had to pay anything back, it's a very, very, very small percentage. Most of our incentives have worked extremely well for bringing in business and jobs.
Can you come with us for our next trade mission?
No, but I can get you all the statistics.
Well, absolutely right there. And, we were recently, about 7 of us traveled to Orlando to meet with the Enterprise Florida marketing group and the project handlers. And we had 2 separate meetings with them. And I'll tell you, they are a hard-working bunch of men and women. And it was enjoyable for us to go there and sit with them because it's hard for them to come up and visit our area or all the other areas of Florida. But that was a great opportunity to talk about incentives and what's happening. And I can remember every single governor I've ever worked with, every single one of them supported business development, business growth. So I think if you get all those different governors with all their different philosophies and they all support the same thing, it's got to be something good that's got to come of it, Yeah. So jobs is the biggest issue today. Let's talk a little bit about job creation and what can we do in Northwest Florida with companies like Gulf Power to help us to create more and better jobs for our region today?
Well, we have to work on workforce. That's one of the most important elements of it. And people often think of workforce as just people going to college.
Yeah.
And you and I know from doing economic development work that our businesses need a wide variety of workers. They need both technically skilled workers as well as college educated workers. So whatever we can do to create a workforce that is employable, that they're the best workers they can be for the businesses we need in Northwest Florida,
Absolutely.
the better off we are. Additionally, we have to make sure that we don't have unnecessary roadblocks in the ways of businesses that need to expand or move here. I'm a lawyer, so I recognize that laws are important and regulations are important, but we have to make sure that the rules and regulations we have in our community don't unnecessarily stifle growth. And in other words, we need to ask ourselves sometimes, why do we have that particular rule, and do we need to have that rule going forward? So we've got to make sure we create that environment. We've also got to have what's in the economic development world, product. And that's places for businesses to go. And it's amusing. Sometimes people say, oh, we got sites, we got plenty of sites. And what they really mean is they have a vacant fill. And you and I know that's not really a site. You have to invest in it. It's got to have the right infrastructure around it. It's got to have roads that are nearby. It's got to have either airports or seaports. A distribution center needs a lot of that, and distribution centers are great. It's got to have good roads and roads that are not already at max capacity. And it might need to have some other types of infrastructure that's there for utilities. Right. And so that's got to be real product that we have, and we have to develop that. And Gulf Power is trying to help do that. So we've got to make sure we've got the people, we've got the land, and we've got the right environment for business.
You know, it's funny, I had this conversation about a week ago with John Hutchinson in our executive board meeting, and I said, you know, Gulf Power has never given us an ultimatum, say, here, we want you to target these type industries because it's good for Gulf Power. I've never heard that, you know, and I posed that question because I thought, you know, really, you know, you're pretty unselfish about what you do in helping the community, and we're going to talk about that in a second, but you hit upon something I think is very important. You hit upon jobs and how to attract companies here and how to keep the companies here that we have, and you know, that is a big challenge, and I know one of the things that Gulf Power is working on right now is certified sites. Mm-hmm. And I think that's, you know, from what I understand, we don't have any. And yet our neighbors, like Alabama, have like 28 certified sites. Can you talk a little bit about that? Yeah,
the state of Florida has one. When we initially started talking about the program, we weren't aware, but we've since found out that there's one certified site all in the state of Florida. South Mississippi has 12. Alabama and Georgia have in the mid to high 20s. 25, I think, for Alabama, 28 for Georgia, somewhere around in that. And a certified site just means somebody, probably a site selector, has come down, looked at a site, and told you what you need for a certain type of industry to come there, and then you actually go through the process of doing that preparatory work, and then that site is certified for that industry. For us, it's probably going to be some type of light manufacturing or technology company. And once you do that, when a company is looking to move there or expand their business, they actually see that there's a site that's already good for them to come to. They don't have to worry about whether or not they're going to have the infrastructure that they need. Exactly. So it gives you a real leg up. And you're right now, when we look around us in the immediate area, if we're competing with an Alabama or Georgia or Mississippi, we're way behind on the certified site area. So what Gulf Power decided to do was to create a site certification program. And what we will do is we'll pay for the creation of that program, and then we'll help communities for sites that are owned by local governments develop those sites and get those sites certified. Excellent.
Well, you know, the interest is there. As I talk to the communities across this part of the state especially, there is interest in from, I know, private companies and from publicly owned industrial parks, commercial parks, to get their sites certified. They don't understand what it means, but it sounds good. Yeah. And that's good, because that means they're going to request additional information. And once they see that those sites can make a difference in terms of a company looking at your area and not looking at your area. Let's take, for example, what you mentioned, Mississippi, Alabama, and Georgia. They've got certified sites, and when a company's looking, they know that that's going to cut their time probably by a third to be able to get into that building or that facility a lot faster with the fact that it's certified, and that all that work is taken care of ahead of time. So if you don't have that in place, you're already behind your competition, and that's where we've been losing. So that is an area I'm interested that Gulf Power has taken this initiative to move in that direction that will help our communities. That's just another thing that you're doing that is going to pay off long-term benefits.
Thanks.
So let's talk about some of the companies that we're trying to track. You know, we target certain industries, and I mentioned that Gulf Power really doesn't say, well, you should be targeting these. We target certain industries for our region because we have a strong military, because the military, I heard a number that we have 70,000 military in our region, and there's something like 7,000 a year retire. It's a lot of people.
It is.
And there's where that quality of life comes into place, because from our understanding and our research, those retired transition military men want to stay here. They don't want to go someplace else. That's why they're here. So how do we keep them? How do we train them? There's a new task force being put together now.
Yep.
And again, Gulf Power's is a major role in that. Can we talk about that task force and what its role might be in developing some better trained people for the area?
Yeah, it's a technical training task force, and Stan Connolly, who's the CEO of Gulf Power, is leading that task force along with Alan Bentz. And what we find is that for a little bit of time we've been focusing maybe a little too much attention on people getting bachelor's degrees and not enough people getting a technical education. That doesn't mean that can't be a 4-year degree, because there are at our state colleges lots of 4-year programs that are what we would consider technical programs. Right. But we've got to focus back on those technical programs so that we can have those technical workers. Additionally, we have, like you just mentioned, a great number of people who come out of our armed services. I think I remember when I moved here, I was told that Northwest Florida had the highest concentration of military retirees than anywhere else in the country on a per capita type of basis.
That's correct.
And that is because it is one of the most beautiful places that live. People who come to our military bases want to come back, or people who hear about Northwest Florida and know that it's an environment that is friendly for military retirees want to come here even if they've never lived here. And so it's taking that resource, it's an awesome resource for us to have, and helping that resource be able to transition to their next phase of life. That is a great thing for us to do. And that technical training program is about taking those resources and making sure we can really use them going forward. And they want to be used. You can retire from the military at, with 20 years at 30 years old or 40 years old. What are you going to do next? So you can really come and you can do a great job at Gulf Power or a million of our other companies here in Northwest Florida.
Yeah, at my age, I'm not thinking of retirement either, and these men and women are half my age, and, they've got a whole career life ahead of them. And it's exciting if we could provide some training programs for them to get them to another level of what they're already trained to do.
Yes.
And, when I was traveling in the New York area, we found that just about all of the consultants know the makeup. You walk into their offices, they know the makeup and the economics of our region almost as well as we do. And I mean, that's comforting. That means they have done their research, but they also know that there is a demand for certain type occupations that we're missing. I think this task force that's being put together, and they meet very soon, is going to probably be something that I think the rest of the state of Florida is going to want to mirror, because it's a great idea. It's overdue and coming. And I talked to one of our manufacturers in the region just the other day, and he said, Larry, he said, I'm having a difficult time finding certain type training. And I said, well, do you know about this task force? He says, I've heard about it. He says it can't be put together too soon for me.
Yeah. So
I think that that's another leg up that we're moving in the right direction to make sure that long-term economic development growth is here to stay for us. Let's talk a little bit about something I know that you have a great love for, and that's the community service outside of economic development that you're involved with and Gulf Power is involved with. So can you elaborate on that a little bit?
We like to say at Gulf Power, it's in our DNA to be involved in our communities. And just this year, Southern Company, that's our parent company, turned 100 years old, and we published a book called Big Bets. And it's the history of Southern Company. And it's a remarkable book, but when you read it as an employee, what you walk away with is a real sense of purpose about why we are here. And we know we're the electric utility, and we know that in the communities we serve, no one chose us, or not many people had the opportunity to choose us. And we want this to be the best community that it can be. We don't want you to think about the fact that necessarily you didn't choose us. We want you to feel like we recognize and appreciate the fact that we get to be here to serve you as a customer. And that means we have to help make these communities as strong as we can. Gulf Power has a mission, and the last part of our mission, it says to strengthen the communities we serve. And when we do community service work, whether or not that is donations of monies to charities or volunteer hours that we spend with charities or leadership that we provide to different organizations in our community, we know that it strengthens these communities. And it's really not about how many megawatts come from that. It's about the fact that strong communities are good for everybody. It makes us more productive. It gives us a place where people want to come, work, and play. So it helps with economic development. It helps us live in an environment where we're free from crime and other things like that. So we believe that giving back to our communities is the least we can do because we're allowed to serve these communities.
Well, you know, I think Gulf Power has done an outstanding job with leadership like yours in branding the organization as a very civic-minded organization, and you know, I know you're going to maintain that because I know it's in your DNA.
Yeah.
So I thank you for that, and we're about out of time. And do any last thoughts about Gulf Power regional approach, Florida's Great Northwest, that you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I just want to make sure everybody remembers that economic development is a team sport. And we live in a great place. I like to go places and jokingly say, like other people have, that I live where thousands live like millions wish they could. And I love this place, and I hope we all continue to make Northwest Florida a great place to live, work, and play. Thank you.
Bentina Terry, Vice President, External Affairs and Corporate Services for Gulf Power. And in closing, Bentina, I'd like to just reiterate what I said at the beginning of the show. This is our first show for Florida's Great Northwest. We're going to be taping around the region from Tallahassee to Pensacola, and we're going to talk about how we're branding this economic development region organization and the corporate marketing strategies that we're employing to create new jobs and better jobs for all the people in Northwest Florida. And finally, to make sure that we educate, you know, our leadership in the local governments and state governments about what we're trying to do to influence the right kind of growth for Northwest Florida. You know, with companies like Gulf Power and Bentina Terry to help us and guide us with their support, we're not going to fail. We're going to continue to be successful. And we want that message to convey to you. So thank you so much for being a part of this show. Bettina, thank you again.
Thank you.
And I hope you enjoy this show and join us again next month. Thank you.